They didn't see her. Not really. She could walk through the glass atrium of the building, pushing that big yellow mop bucket with one hand, holding her mother's extra gloves in the other, and no one would lift their head. Not even once. The revolving doors would whoosh behind her. The polished marble would echo under her sneakers. And still, silence. Like she wasn't even there. But she was. And every night, for nearly 4 years, she had been. Her name was Angelica Monroe, 17 years old, barely 5'2", with a sharp, quick step and an even quicker mind. Her mother, Marisol Monroe, worked as a night janitor on the 32nd floor of Halverson and Co., one of those sleek corporate giants with gold letter logos and elevators that didn't stop on every floor unless you had the badge. Marisol didn't have the badge. She had the keys, a ring of them, heavy, loud, hanging at her hip like armor. Angelica followed her mother every night after school, not because she had to, but because it was safer that way. Safer than leaving Marisol alone to scrub bathrooms until 2 a.m. in that building where no one even knew her name. And besides, Angelica liked being invisible. From a distance, she liked to watch people who thought no one was watching them. It was a game she'd started when she was 13. She'd carry the trash bags, hold the elevator, stay silent while suits whispered behind glass walls about numbers, about clients, about decisions that seemed to change people's lives in places Angelica had never seen. She wasn't supposed to hear anything. She was just the janitor's daughter. But that night, the one that changed everything, she heard everything. It started with a sound, not loud, just wrong. A chair scraping against the tile at 10:47 p.m., long after the office should have been empty. Marisol was in the West Wing restroom, humming quietly to herself in Spanish. Angelica had wandered to the executive boardroom, the place she loved to walk past because of how spotless it always looked, like no one dared to sit there too long. The lights inside were still on, a soft glow behind the frosted glass door. And then, the chair. She froze. She should have walked away. That's what her mother always said. Cuando no es tuyo, no mires, no escuches. Solo sigue caminando. If it's not yours, don't look, don't listen. Just keep walking. But Angelica didn't walk. She stepped closer, pressed her ear to the glass. The voices inside were muffled, low, fast, serious. Men, one woman, maybe 4 people total. She couldn't make out words, but the tone was enough. Urgent, sharp. Then something happened. A folder slammed on the table. A pause, and one voice, deeper than the others, and said, "We bury this clause, no one finds it, and we walk away clean. Got it?" Her pulse jumped. Clause. She didn't know much about contracts, but she knew what people sounded like when they were hiding something. Another voice, a nervous one, responded, "What if legal catches it?" The deeper voice, colder now, replied, "They won't. No one reads the addendum. It's hidden under the compliance language. Who's going to read 6 pages of that?" Silence again, then laughter. Angelica stepped back. Her breath hitched. She didn't understand everything they said, but she understood this. Someone was planning to hide something, in a contract, on purpose, and they didn't care who it hurt. That moment, that instant, her life split in half. Before, just a quiet girl with her mother's keys. After, the only person in that entire building who dared to read what no one else did. She didn't tell her mother that night. She couldn't. Instead, she waited. At midnight, when the top floor emptied and the voices were gone, Angelica slipped back into the boardroom. Her fingers shook as she reached for the stack of papers left behind. 6 pages. Legal addendum. Investment restructuring plan, subsection C. The clause was there, buried on page 5, paragraph 11. small, tightly spaced font, wrapped in language that no normal person would ever understand. But Angelica understood enough. It was a trap. It signed over something big, something hidden, and worse, it took power from the company and handed it to an unnamed third party in the Caymans. It was corporate theft written in plain sight. Only no one was looking. She stared at it, then at the room, then back at the claws, and whispered, barely louder than her own breath, "They're going to lose everything." That's when she heard it, the soft creak of the boardroom door, opening behind her. She turned, slowly, and for the first time in her life inside that building, someone looked at her. The man at the door didn't speak. He just stood there. Tall, thin, silver hair swept back like he'd done it 1,000 times without a mirror. His suit looked expensive, but not flashy. The kind of expensive that whispered instead of shouted. In his right hand, a leather briefcase. In his left, a phone that was still glowing. Angelica froze, her fingers still on the stack of papers, her heart pounding so loudly she thought maybe he could hear it, echoing off the glass walls, rattling inside her chest. He didn't move, just stared at her, not with anger, but confusion, like she wasn't supposed to exist, like he was looking at a glitch in the matrix. "You're," he said finally, his voice low, careful, "not supposed to be in here." Angelica straightened. She didn't speak. She didn't run. She just stood there, eyes steady, feet rooted to the floor like if she moved, the building might collapse. After a long pause, he blinked, once, then turned without a word and walked away. No shouting, no questions, no alarms. Just walked away. She didn't sleep that night. Back in their apartment, 2 small rooms above a laundromat, Angelica sat in the corner of her bed with the addendum clutched in both hands, reading it over and over. Her mother snored softly in the next room, worn out from scrubbing boardroom tables with lemon-scented cleaner and 2 worn-out knees. The apartment buzzed faintly with the hum of the broken fridge. A siren wailed 2 blocks away. But none of it reached Angelica's mind. She kept thinking of the clause, how bold it was, how invisible. She thought of all the people in that building, the powerful ones, the loud ones, who would never, ever read what she just read. Because they didn't have to. Because people like her, people like her mother, weren't supposed to notice things like that. But she noticed, and now she couldn't unnotice. The next evening, she didn't wait for her mother to finish changing into her uniform. She grabbed her own hoodie, stuffed the document into her backpack, and left early. She got to the building before sunset. She watched from the street across, arms crossed, headphones in with no music playing, just watching. 30 floors up, the lights flicked on in the executive wing. The same tall man from the night before entered the glass elevator. Alone. Angelica took a deep breath and crossed the street. Inside, she walked past the front desk like she belonged, like she'd been doing since she was 13. No one stopped her. No one looked. Just the girl with the mop bucket. Again. Only this time, she didn't push the bucket. She took the back stairs 2 floors at a time, heart in her throat. She didn't know what she was doing. Not exactly. Only that if she let this go, she'd never forgive herself. When she reached the storage room near the server closet, she pulled the document back out. Paragraph 11. That was the one. Shall transfer fiduciary oversight in the event of subsidiary restructuring to pre-authorized offshore entity for the purpose of interim liquidity management. It sounded harmless, boring even, but it wasn't. It was poison in a glass of water, and it had been slipped in quietly, and it's just as the man said, buried. She needed help. But who? The janitors wouldn't believe her. The office workers wouldn't listen. Her mother would panic. And even if someone did listen, what would they do? Who would trust a 17-year-old with no degree, no title, no badge? That night, she cleaned slower than usual. In the corner office, she dusted the same shelf 3 times. She paused by the printer room, the one no one used after hours, and noticed a paper jam blinking on the display. When she opened the tray to fix it, something caught her eye. A print job, incomplete, 3 pages left behind. The top one was a memo, internal communication between someone in legal and someone in finance. Angelica squinted. There, in the corner of the page, was a file reference, ADD C17A2. She froze. C17. Clause 17? She flipped to the second page. It was an email, redacted in parts, discussing risk of discovery if full review is triggered by external auditor. So they knew. They knew someone could find it. She stuffed the papers into her backpack and moved on before someone noticed. An hour later, as she polished the floor near the elevators, she overheard 2 managers talking. Legal's getting antsy, one said. They flagged a clause, 17.3, I think, said it doesn't match the version from Q1. They'll redact it, the other replied, sipping from a bottle of something too fancy to be water, or bury it deeper. Angelica kept her eyes on the floor. Her hand moved the mop in slow practice circles. But her mind was racing. They really were going to bury it, and she was the only one who had seen it, heard it, and understood just enough to know what it meant. She wasn't a lawyer. She wasn't an intern. She didn't even have a seat at the table. But maybe she didn't need one. Maybe all she needed was to speak, just once, in a room full of people who'd never heard her voice. By the end of that week, Angelica Monroe knew every line of that clause better than she knew the lyrics to her favorite song. She'd read it so many times she could see the words even when her eyes were closed. The cold language, the fake professionalism, the quiet knife hidden in a sentence no longer than a breath. It wasn't just wrong. It was deliberate, calculated, and someone had counted on nobody noticing. No, not nobody. They'd counted on her not noticing. They'd counted on the janitor's daughter sweeping the corners and ignoring the corners of the contract. But she hadn't. And now she was cleaning something much darker than dust. It started small. Angelica stopped pretending she wasn't listening. She stopped walking away when conversations drifted through half-open doors. She stopped treating herself like a shadow, because shadows see everything. She began organizing everything she found. The printouts, the overheard names, the email fragments left in forgotten trays. She had a folder now, bright red, hidden beneath her chemistry textbook at the bottom of her school bag. She labeled it C17 with a Sharpie. It looked like schoolwork. Nobody questioned it. Every night after she and her mother got home, Marisol would collapse onto the couch, kick off her shoes, and let out the same exhausted sigh. Angelica would go into her room, close the door, and pull out the folder. It felt like living 2 lives. By day, she was a quiet kid in the back row of her senior homeroom, pretending to care about prom flyers and college deadlines she couldn't afford. By night, she was decoding legal sabotage and tracking executives she couldn't name out loud. But the more she read, the heavier it got. It wasn't just one clause, it was a pattern. Layer after layer of contracts, each nudging money and power away from the company and into silence. Offshore accounts, shell firms, vague terms like contingency reinvestment and deferred equity holdings. It was a house of mirrors, and she'd stumbled into the hallway no one was supposed to walk down. She wasn't sure when she started shaking at night, or when she stopped sleeping more than 3 hours. But by the time her mother asked if everything was okay, she'd already decided not to answer. Not yet. Not until she knew how deep it went. One night, around 1:45 a.m., while wiping fingerprints from the glass door to the finance department, she saw something that made her stomach twist. A man in a navy suit, not one she recognized, sitting alone at a computer that was usually locked after hours. His tie was loose, his jacket off, and he was leaning forward, reading something intently, then deleting it, one file, then another, then another. Angelica stood still, the mop in her hand frozen midair. She watched him click, drag, delete. Click, drag, delete. She didn't know what the files were, but she saw the dates, recent, the last week, all labeled with some version of Q3 revisions or equity transfer addendum. She blinked, and the moment her eyes opened again, he was looking right at her. Their eyes locked. She didn't look away. He didn't smile, didn't nod. Just stared for a moment too long, then turned back to the screen and resumed erasing. Angelica left the room without a word. She didn't go back in that night. She didn't have to. She already knew. Someone was cleaning up the paper trail, erasing proof of what was buried in Clause 17. She got home that night with a new kind of silence in her throat, one that sat like a stone. Her mother didn't ask why she stood so long in the doorway, or why she didn't eat, or why she went straight to her room and didn't come out until the sun rose. Angelica stared at the ceiling for hours, and somewhere around 4 a.m. she whispered to the dark, "If I don't do something, they're going to get away with it." The next evening, she waited until her mother was cleaning the executive bathroom on the east wing. Then she slipped into the finance server room with a single goal: find a copy of the contract before they deleted everything. The room was cold, quiet. The hum of machines filled the space like white noise. Angelica sat at the backup terminal, typed in the password she'd seen a tech use weeks earlier: Helvadmin 2023, and prayed it still worked. It did. She dug through folders, deep, deeper, past the shared drives and project outlines, into raw storage, where the unindexed files lived. She found it. Addendum C17 Draft 4.pdf. Her fingers trembled as she dragged it onto a USB drive she'd hidden in her boot for 3 days. It took 8 seconds to copy, the longest 8 seconds of her life. Footsteps echoed outside the door. Angelica yanked the drive, logged out, slid the chair back in, and turned just as the door opened. The man from the night before. Same navy suit, same quiet eyes. But this time, he spoke. "You're not who you pretend to be," he said quietly. Angelica didn't answer. He stepped closer. Just one step. "You're not invisible anymore." Another step. "You need to be very careful." She said nothing, but in her pocket, she clutched the USB like it was fire. And maybe it was. She didn't go back for 3 nights. Said she had too much schoolwork. Said she wasn't feeling well. Said anything that would keep her and her mother from that building, while her pulse still raced every time she saw a man in a navy suit in her memory. Marisol didn't question it much, just made soup and prayed louder at night. She never asked what was wrong, but Angelica could feel it, the unspoken worry tightening the space between them like invisible string. They both knew something had changed. They just didn't name it. Angelica kept the USB in a mint tin hidden behind the old radiator in her bedroom wall. She didn't dare plug it in. Not at home, not on school computers, not anywhere that could be traced. She didn't even look at it, but she felt it, like a ghost pressing against her spine every time she walked across a room. Something had shifted in her. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was certainty. But whatever it was, it didn't let her sleep. By the 4th night, she knew she had to go back. Not for more files, not for revenge, for clarity. Because knowing there was a lie was one thing. Proving it, that was something else entirely. She waited until 11:15 when the building was mostly empty and took the stairs instead of the elevator. Each step felt heavier than the last, like the building itself didn't want her coming back. When she reached the 30th floor, She didn't go to the server room. She went to the IT help desk. It was locked, of course. Lights off, no one inside. But she'd watched enough to know the cleaning crew had a backup key for room access in case of spills. She used her mother's ring, carefully jiggling the lock until it clicked. Inside was quiet, sterile, the faint hum of cooling fans and a single screen blinking from sleep mode. She woke the terminal. Logan required. She typed the password again. Hulvadmin, Huang 23, and access denied. Her stomach dropped. They changed it. She sat in the chair, heart pounding in her ears, and stared at the screen like it might offer a miracle. Then she noticed something. A sticky note stuck to the bottom of the monitor. Ask Jay for vault reset. C code expires EOW. C code? She squinted at the small monitor. In the corner, an open program still running in the background. The icon looked like a network monitor. She clicked. It opened a diagnostic report. Recent error logs, connection failures, file flags. One line stood out. Unauthorized download attempt detected. File, addendum C17 draft 4.pdf. User, guest, unassigned terminal. She sucked in a breath. That was her. That was her download. Someone had seen it, but instead of locking her out, they logged it. They didn't shut the file. They didn't delete it. They watched. Why? She scrolled further. Another line, or newer, flagged that same file as active, pending legal review. Legal review? Was someone else looking at it now? Or had they placed it under watch to trap whoever accessed it next? Angelica leaned back in the chair. The room suddenly felt colder. She wasn't the only ghost in the system anymore. Someone else had followed her shadow. Maybe multiple someones. That's when she heard the voice, muffled but unmistakable. Down the hall. Female, sharp, focused. No, I don't care who flagged it. If that clause leaks, we're dead. Redraft it, rebury it, and keep her out. Angelica slid off the chair and ducked beneath the desk. Footsteps, 2 pairs. The door to IT didn't open. They passed it, moving quickly toward the elevators. One of them, the woman, added, I want her name off every access log by morning. No trace, no incident. She doesn't exist. Angelica's hand clutched her hoodie like armor. She doesn't exist. The janitor's daughter? Again, still. A problem best erased. She waited 5 full minutes before crawling out, replacing the chair exactly, and relocking the door behind her. She didn't go back to her mother that night. Instead, she went down to the first floor, the public floor, and walked out through the main doors into the cold night air. The city was quiet, but not silent. Cars passed. Lights blinked. Somewhere a couple laughed too loudly at something that didn't matter. Angelica sat on the bus bench across the street from the building and stared up at the top floors. How many decisions were made in that tower? How many signed forms? How many signatures without second thoughts? And how many people like her watched it all from behind a mop handle? She pulled out her phone. She didn't have a plan yet, but she knew someone had to see what she saw. And maybe, just maybe, it was time to stop being a ghost and become a glitch. Angelica Monroe wasn't loud, never had been. She didn't raise her hand in class unless she was sure. She didn't argue with cashiers. She didn't talk back to her mother, even when the anger boiled just under her ribs. She listened to people, to tension, to spaces between words. That's what made her dangerous, even if no one saw it yet. She knew how to be still. She knew how to notice. And in a world full of people talking over each other, the girl who listened was the one who heard the truth. It started years ago. She would sit in the supply closet at work while her mother mopped down the long executive hallway, and she would listen. Through walls, through vents, through those giant glass windows that everyone thought made them safe, untouchable. Angelica figured out pretty early that power liked to hear itself speak. And when power forgot the cleaning crew was in the room, it spoke freely. She'd heard breakups, firings, mergers. She'd heard people curse out their bosses, make promises to clients they didn't mean, whisper things over phones they thought were on mute. And she remembered it all. She didn't always understand it, not at first, but she logged it in her brain like puzzle pieces. And now, those pieces were clicking into place. Every conversation she overheard since that clause entered her life took on new weight. Every silence became suspicious. Every name dropped in passing became a lead. There was one name she kept hearing lately, Leona Price, Vice President of Strategic Compliance, one of the few women in a position of real power on the 33rd floor. Angelica had seen her exactly twice, once in the elevator, once in the hallway, and both times Leona's eyes passed right through her like fog. But now Angelica listened for her voice everywhere. Because Leona's name was the one they whispered when they thought no one could hear, she's got the final sign-off. If Leona finds out, we're screwed. Don't let this hit her desk until after Q4 closes. She didn't yell. She didn't make threats. She didn't need to. People moved when Leona's name came up, like a current pulling them. Angelica figured, if anyone had the power to kill Clause 17.3 before it killed the company, it was Leona. So the question became, would she, or was she part of the burial? Angelica needed to hear her, not from behind glass, not through vents, up close. She waited 3 nights before the chance came. It was Thursday, 10:32 p.m. The building was almost empty, but Leona's office light still glowed behind frosted glass. Angelica had just finished wiping the stainless steel coffee station outside the boardroom when Leona stepped out, holding a phone to her ear. "No, I'm not comfortable with that clause," she said, voice low but crisp. "The language is too vague. It exposes us." Angelica froze mid-wipe. "But I don't care if Caleb signed off. If this leaks, we're cooked," Leona snapped. "Tell legal I want a full audit of every draft that went through finance this month. I want eyes on that file. Today." She turned toward the hallway and then paused. Her eyes landed on Angelica. For a split second, they actually saw her. "Hey," Leona said, voice lowering but not softening. "You work the night shift?" Angelica nodded slowly. "With my mom." Leona didn't smile. She didn't thank her. She just looked curious. "You ever see a silver flash drive in the West Wing server closet?" she asked. "It would have been misplaced 2 nights ago." Angelica's throat dried up. She shook her head. "No, ma'am." Leona stared at her for another long moment, then exhaled through her nose. "Okay. If you do, don't touch it. It's got sensitive information. You understand?" Angelica nodded again. "Good." Leona turned and walked back into her office. Angelica stood frozen for a full minute, heart pounding in her ears. Then slowly she turned back to the counter and kept wiping, even though it was already clean. Sensitive information, so Leona knew, or at least suspected. That night, Angelica walked home with her mother as usual. They didn't speak much. The city buzzed in the background, all headlights and sirens and steam rising from manholes. But Angelica's head was elsewhere, rewinding every word. It wasn't enough to overhear, not anymore. She needed more than secrets in the dark. She needed light, proof, confirmation. She needed someone to say it out loud, that Clause 17.3 was wrong, that it was planted, that it was dangerous. Because right now she was just a girl who listened. But maybe, if she was brave enough, she could become the girl they had to listen to. The next morning, Marisol Monroe stood in the kitchen with a steaming cup of instant coffee, her eyes heavy, her shoulders even heavier. She didn't sit. She never did in the morning, always stood, leaned against the counter, like if she stopped moving too long, the world might remember to crush her. Angelica walked in quietly, barefoot, hoodie zipped up to her chin. Her mother glanced at her, then back at the coffee. "You're not sleeping," she said. Angelica shrugged. "I'm fine." Marisol took a sip, then set the mug down hard. "Don't lie to me, mija." Angelica looked away. Her mother's voice softened. Not much, but enough to feel the shift. "I know that face, that look. Your abuela had it too, like there's a storm inside your bones." Angelica didn't answer. "You think I don't notice? You've been walking around like a ghost, quiet even for you." Still nothing. Marisol stepped forward and reached out, touched her daughter's shoulder gently. The cleaning gloves had left faint calluses on her fingertips. "I've seen this before," she said. "Back home, before we came here, people digging into things that don't want to be dug up. People thinking the truth is enough." Angelica raised her eyes. "It's not." Marisol hesitated. The question lingered like a bruise in the room. "The truth is only enough when someone powerful is willing to listen," she said. "Otherwise, it's a weight you carry alone." Angelica bit her lip. Marisol studied her daughter's face. Then her voice dropped lower. "You need to be careful." "I am." "No, I mean careful. Not the kind where you cross the street with your head up. The kind where you don't poke the wrong bear because you think you've got a sharp stick." Angelica let out a shaky breath. "What if they're hiding something, Mommy? What if it's big?" Marisol looked away. Her jaw clenched. She didn't ask what, didn't want to know. Instead, she said, "Do you remember what happened to Mr. De La Vega?" Angelica frowned. "The security guard?" Marisol nodded. "He found a thumb drive last year, took it home, didn't even open it, just showed it to someone from HR. A week later, he was gone. Said it was a contract breach. I saw his wife last month. They had to move in with her sister in Yonkers. No job, no references." Angelica's stomach tightened. "But he didn't do anything." Marisol's eyes darkened. "Exactly." There was a long pause. Then Marisol reached for Angelica's face, brushing a curl back behind her ear like she used to when she was small. "I know you, mi corazon. You see things. You feel things deep. That's a blessing, but sometimes it's a curse." Angelica whispered, "But if we don't say anything, then what? We just watch?" Her mother's hand dropped. "We survive," she said. Angelica looked down, her voice barely a breath now. "Sometimes that's not enough." And that was the moment something broke between them. Not in anger, not in love, but in the silent knowledge that they stood on different sides of a line, one drawn by the world they lived in, one Marisol had learned never to cross. That evening, Angelica didn't ask if her mother was ready for work. She left early, alone. Her mother didn't stop her, but she watched her go, from the kitchen window, coffee cooling in her hand, lips pressed into a silent prayer that her daughter would come home the same way she left, and that the world would be kind to a girl who hadn't learned yet that kindness was a currency few people were willing to spend. She didn't go straight to the 32nd floor that night. Instead, Angelica took the elevator to 17, the legal department, a floor she'd only been on once before, when her mother got assigned to deep clean after some mold issue in the copy room. 17 smelled like old paper and new fear. Not like the rest of the building. The high floors had citrus and money in the air. Down here, everything was dimmer, heavier. No music from the lobby, no warm lighting, just pale green carpet and a long hallway with shut doors, each with a gold plate etched in small, serious letters. Review Division A, Legal Strategy, Internal Risk Assessment. She walked slowly, pushing an empty cart. Her hoodie hood was up, head down. She looked like part of the furniture, except she wasn't. She passed a glass-walled room and paused. Inside, a woman with tight curls and red glasses sat at a long desk, flipping through a file with a highlighter clenched between her teeth. The screen behind her showed a contract draft, paragraph formatting open, text blinking. Angelica stepped closer, just enough to read a line. Clause 17.3, addendum validity revised. Her chest tightened. So they were working on it. They were changing it. But why revise a clause that shouldn't exist? Angelica knew the answer. Same reason people bury a body instead of reporting it. Because the truth would ruin them. Clause 17.3 wasn't just unethical, it was fatal. It was a trigger, a landmine placed neatly between corporate speak and legal gibberish. And if signed as written, it would shift financial control of Halverson and Commerciuri to an offshore holding disguised as a liquidity partner. On paper, it looked like risk management. In reality, it was a legal backdoor for corporate hijacking. And someone wrote it. Someone approved it. Someone was trying to hide it. She moved on, down the hallway, past the double doors marked Contract Repository. They were locked, of course, but she knew that. She wasn't there to go in. She just wanted to see who came out. And 20 minutes later, someone did. A young man in a shirt too crisp for this hour, holding a leather folder and muttering into a Bluetooth earpiece. Angelica ducked into an alcove and listened. No, it's not redacted yet. Leona wants to hold. Yeah, she said if it gets flagged, she's not backing it. If it leaks, she wants distance. Pause. I told her, it's a clause that shouldn't even be there. Angelica's hand gripped the mop handle harder. There it was. Words she'd been holding in her chest for weeks. Said by someone inside the system. A clause that shouldn't even be there. The man walked past her without a glance. She waited a full 5 minutes before moving again. Back upstairs, the floor was quieter than usual. The kind of quiet that meant people were working too hard to talk. Angelica passed Caleb's office, the assistant director of finance. His door was slightly ajar, and through it, she heard a rustle and the unmistakable beep of a paper shredder. She didn't look. She didn't stop. But the sound stayed with her, that thin, steady whine of truth being destroyed an inch at a time. She made her way to the corner office, the one they never let her clean, the one labeled executive access only. But tonight no one was inside, and the door, unlocked. She hesitated, glanced over her shoulder, then slipped inside. The room was colder than the rest, sleek, clean. A desk the size of her entire bedroom, 2 chairs, and a floor-to-ceiling window that looked out over the entire city, like a throne room in a tower. She didn't care about the view. She cared about the laptop glowing faintly behind the desk. She moved quickly. No time to hesitate. She sat, woke the screen. No password prompt. Open window. Contract archive viewer. Addendum C17. Draft 6. Her breath caught. It was newer than the version she had. Same structure, same header, but paragraph 11 was different, reworded, polished, more careful now. Still a trap, but better hidden. She read it slowly, mouthing the words. Upon activation of liquidity protocol, control of non-core financial assets shall be temporarily transferred to third-party custodial management, pending audit and stabilization period. It sounded like standard procedure, like boring risk language, but the term third-party custodial management was undefined. No names, no accountability, just control handed off to a shadow with no face. Angelica leaned back. They weren't deleting the clause, they were refining it, sanding the edges, making it harder to spot, making it look legal. She copied the file to her second USB, then pulled out the original draft, the one from the week before, 2 versions, side by side, the lie evolving in real time. She stared at the screen for a long time. Then she said it aloud, for the first time, slowly, like each word might crack the silence around her. This clause shouldn't exist. And deep inside her, something clicked into place, a sense of certainty, not just that they were wrong, but that she was right. Right to look, right to listen, right to fight. The next morning, the front door key didn't work. Angelica stood there for a full minute, twisting it in both directions, jiggling the knob, trying not to panic, but it was no use. The lock had been changed. The bolt wouldn't budge. She knocked once, then again, harder. From inside, she heard her mother's voice, faint, surprised, and the scuffle of slippered feet across linoleum. Then the door opened. Marisol looked at her daughter, and something in her face collapsed. "They were here," she whispered. Angelica stepped inside, heart pounding. "Who?" Marisol closed the door behind her, locked it, bolted it, then led Angelica into the living room, which was a mess, not violently torn apart, but wrong. The drawers had been opened, the kitchen cabinet under the sink, where Marisol kept her spare badge and gloves, left swinging, and Angelica's school backpack turned inside out on the couch. "They said they were with building security," Marisol said, voice trembling. "Showed me a badge. Said they needed to do a sweep for unauthorized materials." Angelica didn't speak. Marisol turned to her. "What's going on, Angelica? What did you do?" Angelica opened her mouth, but nothing came out, because she hadn't told her yet. Not the full truth, not the files, not the clause, not the second USB drive still hidden inside the hollowed-out book on her bedroom shelf. Marisol's eyes were wide now, afraid. "They said if we talked about it, our contract with Halverson would be terminated," she whispered. "No references, no pension, no final check." Angelica's hands were shaking. She sat down, hard. The couch groaned beneath her. "They're trying to erase me," she said softly. "Not just the files, me." Marisol sat too, slower, like she suddenly felt her age in her spine. "You're 17, she whispered. "You clean offices. You're a kid, mija." Angelica shook her head. "Not to them. Not anymore." There was a long silence between them, the kind that feels heavy, final, like a door quietly closing behind you. Then Marisol reached for her daughter's hand. "You need to stop." Angelica looked at her, eyes wide, raw. "I can't." "Why not?" "Because if I do," her voice cracked, "they win." Marisol said nothing, but her hand didn't let go. That night when they arrived at the building, their badges beeped red. Access denied. The man at the front desk, someone Angelica had never seen before, looked up, blinked twice, then picked up the phone. A minute later, someone from HR came down, smiling too brightly, apologizing too politely. "We've reassigned your cleaning zones for the week," she said. "There's some technical maintenance on 32. You'll be working basement level tonight." Angelica said nothing. Marisol just nodded. They took the elevator down, and when the doors opened, the air hit them like a slap. Stale, damp, no windows, just endless pipes and humming utility rooms. They cleaned in silence. At 1:17 a.m., Angelica slipped away while her mother was scrubbing the staff locker room. She took the back stairwell to floor 22, the data archive level, and found her access badge had been completely revoked. Nothing opened, not even the janitor override. They'd scrubbed her. She wasn't just reassigned, she was being erased. She sat in the stairwell, breath shallow, and stared at the wall like it might offer answers. They'd changed the locks, searched her home, cut her access, but they didn't confront her. They didn't threaten her directly. They were pretending she didn't exist, while quietly trying to undo everything she'd found, which meant they were afraid. That realization came like a flicker of light through smoke. They were afraid of a 17-year-old girl with no degree, no connections, and a backpack full of stolen documents. Because she was telling the truth. Angelica stood up slowly. She wasn't disappearing. She was becoming undeniable. She walked back down the stairwell, one quiet step at a time, the sound of her footsteps echoing behind her, like a warning no one could silence anymore. The air in the apartment felt different that night, tighter, heavier, like it knew something was about to change. Angelica sat at the tiny kitchen table, her second USB drive in front of her, spinning it slowly between her fingers like it was some kind of coin she was about to flip. Heads, silence. Tails, war. Across the room, Marisol stood by the stove, cooking a roast with too much water. Her hands moved, but her mind was elsewhere. She hadn't said much since the night they were locked out of the upper floors, since the fake smiles and forced reassignment, since the truth started closing in. Angelica looked up. "Mommy," she said, voice low but steady. Marisol didn't turn around. "Hmm? I need to talk to someone." "About what?" Angelica took a breath. "About them. About the claws. About everything." Marisol's hand froze above the rice. She didn't speak for a long moment. Then, slowly, she turned around. "You're serious?" Angelica nodded. Her mother's eyes softened and hardened at the same time. A storm behind a window. "Who?" she asked. Not yelling, not whispering, just one word, filled with 1,000 unspoken warnings. Angelica opened her laptop. "I've been reading this blog. It's run by a woman named Denise Palmer. She's a corporate whistleblower. Used to work in ethics and compliance for some bank. She got fired for exposing fake audits. Now she runs this thing where she helps people come forward anonymously if they need to." Marisol sat down slowly, the chair creaking beneath her. "She'll believe you?" "I don't know." Silence. "She could help?" "Maybe." Marisol looked at the USB drive, then at her daughter. "What if they come after you?" Angelica looked back. "They already did." The next morning, she emailed Denise Palmer. It wasn't dramatic, no manifesto, just a message. Direct, simple, true. "I believe my employer is hiding a fraudulent clause in a multi-million-dollar contract. I have two versions of the draft, a log of file deletions, and a record of unauthorized data access. I'm 17, and I work in the building through a custodial contract. Please tell me if you can help." She clicked send, closed the laptop, waited. 5 hours later, she got a reply. Subject, urgent. Let's talk. Now. Denise didn't ask many questions at first, just told Angelica to breathe, to slow down, to start from the beginning, but only what she felt safe sharing. Angelica talked, Denise listened, and for the first time in weeks, someone actually heard her. They set up a secure drop, encrypted files, private server. Angelica sent everything. Every version of the clause, every note, every screenshot, even the floor plan where she found the file on the server. She held nothing back, and when she was done, Denise said 3 words that almost knocked the breath out of her. "You're not wrong." That night, Angelica barely slept, not because she was afraid, not like before, but because something had shifted inside her, something solid, something certain. In the morning, Denise called again. "There's one more thing," she said. "We need a name. Not yours, not yet, but someone on the inside who's seen the same clause and hasn't said anything. Someone they'll be forced to listen to if we make it public." Angelica hesitated. Her thoughts swirled. Then, one face came to mind. Sharp eyes, red glasses, a highlighter clenched between her teeth. Leona Price. She didn't know for sure what Leona knew, but she knew this. Leona had seen her, had looked her in the eye, had warned her. That meant something. I have someone, Angelica said quietly. Denise's voice dropped into a near whisper. Then it's time. Time to make noise. Time to stop being invisible. Time to speak. And not stop. It started with an email. One email, sent at 8:42 a.m. on a cloudy Tuesday morning. From Denise Palmer to Halverson and Combert Legal Affairs, Internal Review, CC, PressAbroadFinancialPost.com, CorporateWatch.org, 3 unnamed legal auditors. Subject line, request for immediate internal review. Suspected fraudulent clause in active corporate addendum. C17.3. The moment it hit the inboxes, the silence shattered. Phones started ringing. Meetings were canceled. Executives who hadn't been in the office before noon in years were suddenly arriving before 9. The building felt different, charged with a kind of electric panic no one could name out loud, and Angelica Monroe was already there. She sat quietly in the back hallway with her mop bucket and gloves, headphones in with no music playing, her eyes fixed on the elevator screens like a chess player watching pieces shift. She hadn't told her mother, not yet, not until she knew how deep this would go. But she could feel it in her chest. They knew. Someone upstairs had read the email, and someone was scared. At 10:07 a.m., Leona Price emerged from the elevator, phone pressed tight to her ear, lips pursed. She was walking faster than usual, eyes scanning, pulse visible at her neck. And I don't care if she's a janitor or a ghost. Somebody read that clause, she snapped into the phone, and they knew enough to make it public. Angelica ducked behind a pillar and listened. I want the original draft. I want every revision log. And I want to know who deleted the flag files last Thursday. No more, it was lost in the archive crap. Another pause. No, don't shut it down, not yet. If we erase it now, it'll look worse. Do you hear me? Let the review happen. I want to control it, not cover it. She vanished into the legal floor. By noon, HR was checking in on random employees with vague surveys. It ran a surprise audit of all access logs from the past month. Conference room calendars were quietly cleared for emergency policy briefings. And just after lunch, a memo was sent company-wide. In response to external inquiries and in the interest of full transparency, Halverson and Comey is opening a voluntary internal review regarding recent contractual language revisions in active agreements. No action is required at this time. We appreciate your cooperation. Angelica read it in the stairwell, the email glowing on her phone like a crack in a dam. They were playing it off as routine, as voluntary, but she knew better. Denise had told her. Once it's public, they can't bury it quietly, not anymore. Still, that didn't mean they wouldn't try. That evening, Angelica returned home to find a letter slid under their door. Plain envelope, no return address. Inside, one page, typed. We are aware of recent communications made in bad faith with the intention of disrupting Halverson and Comesser's operations. Be advised that unauthorized access to company materials may carry legal consequences under applicable federal statutes. Consider this your only warning. No signature, no name, but Angelica didn't need one. She walked into her room, locked the door, sat at her desk, and plugged in the USB drive. Then she typed, to Denise, to the Broad Financial Post, to 3 more journalists, to a compliance lawyer whose name she found through a Reddit post about whistleblowers. She attached the clause. Again. The deleted file logs. Again. Her notes, time-stamped, copied by hand into a scanned notebook page for proof of origin. And then in a new message box, she wrote 12 simple words. I'm 17. I read what they hoped no one ever would. And then she hit send. Again and again. By the end of that night, it had begun. Not just an investigation, but a reckoning. At 6:14 the next morning, The CEO of Halverson and Comer, Malcolm Rennick, stood alone in his glass-walled office on the 35th floor, staring out at a city that no longer looked quite like his. He hadn't slept. There were 3 open email threads on his screen. One from the legal department, urgent. One from a journalist requesting comment, aggressive. And one, the worst of all, from the board's audit committee, cold, clipped, and clearly preparing for something no CEO wants to see in writing. We expect a formal explanation of Clause 17.3 and the irregularities associated with its placement by end of day. Clause 17.3. The clause that should have been buried, the clause that no one was supposed to notice, the clause that a janitor's daughter had read. Malcolm clenched his jaw, fingers tightening around the edge of the marble desk. He remembered the meeting. Vaguely, some late-night finance debrief. A temporary restructuring clause, they'd called it. Standard language. Risk-adjusted. Blah, blah, blah. He hadn't read it. That's what lawyers were for. That's what compliance was for. Now it was on the front page of half a dozen finance blogs with words like fraudulent insertion, shell entity redirection, and whistleblower exposure. He was a CEO, a face, a handshake. He made decisions, not definitions. And yet, here it was, his problem, his mess, his name. He turned from the window and picked up the folder on his desk. The girl's file, Angelica Monroe, 17. No employee number, no formal connection to corporate systems. Access through her mother's third-party custodial contract. No one had noticed her. She'd been there for years, in the background, in the shadows, sweeping the corners, listening. She wasn't an intern, not a paralegal, not a temp, just the janitor's daughter, and she had blown a hole through the company's walls that no PR team could patch. Malcolm flipped the page and saw the photograph. A school ID scan, big brown eyes, straight face. Nothing flashy, but there was something in that look. Defiant, still. Like she knew what she'd done and didn't regret a second of it. His phone buzzed. Twice. A message from Leona Price. Audit committee wants you downstairs now. Press team's waiting. Another from legal counsel. The file logs match her access, but she's not the source of the clause. She exposed it. That's different. Malcolm sighed and sat down heavily in the leather chair that cost more than her mother's monthly paycheck. He stared at the girl's name again. Not an employee, not on payroll, not in the official system, yet somehow, the most powerful person in the company this week. He should have been furious, should have called security, should have launched an investigation into her. But instead, he felt something else, something that crawled under his skin like cold water. Shame. Because the truth was, he hadn't known. He hadn't read the clause. He'd signed because they told him to, trusted because it was easy, moved fast because that's what leaders do. He hadn't listened, but she had. And now the whole world was listening to her. The door opened without a knock. Leona stepped inside, all sharp angles and tightly coiled fury. They're going to ask if you knew, she said. I didn't, Malcolm muttered. That won't matter. He leaned back. What do they want me to do? Leona folded her arms. They want someone to blame. Malcolm looked up. Her? Leona's expression didn't change. You say it was an unauthorized leak? She's gone. We recover, quietly. He stared at her. She saved us, he said. Leona didn't blink. Not the company, the truth. That's not the same thing. The silence stretched. Then Malcolm stood. And after a long pause, he said quietly, almost to himself, maybe it should be. And he walked out of the office, past Leona, down the hall, toward the boardroom, ready to make a decision that no CEO wants to make, but one that a 17-year-old girl had already made for him. They were quiet when he entered, all 12 of them. The boardroom was colder than usual, not in temperature, but in something else. Like the walls themselves knew what was coming. No coffee cups, no idle chatter, just silence, and the weight of consequences finally catching up. Malcolm Rennick didn't sit right away. He placed the folder on the table, carefully, like a surgeon preparing for something messy. "I assume you've all read the report," he said. A few heads nodded. A few stayed still. Leona stood near the corner, arms crossed, her face unreadable. The lead auditor, a woman named Vera Daly, spoke first. The clause was unauthorized. It was deliberately hidden within a larger restructuring addendum. The original version was signed off by 3 senior financial officers. 2 are no longer with the company. 1 is sitting here now. All eyes shifted to Caleb Morgan. He didn't move, didn't blink, just leaned back in his chair like this was all a bad dream he'd watched on a screen too many times. "I didn't write it," Caleb said. "No," Vera replied, flipping a page. "But you approved it. 3 times. I was told it was standard. And you didn't read it." Caleb's jaw tightened. No one does. That line hung in the air. Poisonous. Because it was true. No one did. That's what made it possible. Buried beneath legal jargon, masked in normalcy, hidden in plain sight. A lie dressed up like paperwork. And the worst part, it didn't even take a genius to find it. It just took someone who bothered to look. Someone who wasn't supposed to. Someone no one had seen coming. Malcolm finally sat. "The girl," he said. "Angelica Monroe." A beat. "She's not our employee," another board member muttered. "She is now," Malcolm said. "Whether we like it or not." More silence. Vera cleared her throat. "You understand the exposure this creates. External media already has the drafts. Denise Palmer's publication named the clause explicitly. If the SEC opens an inquiry, we're vulnerable." "I know. Then what's the plan?" Leona asked. Malcolm looked at her. "Tell the truth." That stopped the room cold. "The truth?" Caleb repeated. "Yes." A long breath. "She didn't forge anything. She didn't hack a system. She read a contract, one we all ignored. And she exposed something we should have seen. We can try to erase her, but the clause is still there. The problem isn't her. It's us." Someone scoffed. Vera leaned forward. "And what about the ones who did see it?" That question shifted the room again, because that's when it became real. This wasn't about a girl who spoke up. It was about the people who knew and said nothing. The ones who forwarded emails without opening the attachments. The ones who initialed without reading the fine print. The ones who assumed someone else was watching the gate. They were all complicit, not because they lied, but because they let someone else lie for them. Malcolm folded his hands. "I won't fire her." No one spoke. "I won't silence her. And if anyone in this room chooses to resign over that, the door's right there." A pause, then Leona stepped forward, slowly, placed a folder on the table. Inside, a full list of revision logs. Every version of Clause 17.3. Every signature. Every timestamp. She looked around the room. Burn it all. Rewrite everything. The clean way. She didn't look at Caleb, but she didn't have to. He stood, straightened his tie, and walked out. No goodbye. No fight. Just left. Vera let out a breath, almost a sigh. Malcolm stood again, reached for the folder, the one with Angelica's name, and slid it into his briefcase. Then he looked at the board. "She saved us from ourselves," he said. "The least we can do is stop pretending we deserve the credit." And then he left the room too, leaving behind 12 very quiet people, and the sound of accountability creeping in through the cracks. The internet didn't explode overnight, but it didn't have to. It simmered. Blogger posts, Reddit threads, anonymous comments on investor forums, whispers on legal subchannels. Did you read the clause? This 17-year-old girl found what no one else did. They tried to bury her. She dug back. Angelica didn't watch the news. Not really. She just kept refreshing the same 3 browser tabs every few hours, waiting for the moment someone said her name out loud. It hadn't happened yet, but the ripples were spreading, and inside her, something was shifting too. Not pride, not fear, something in between. She knew what she'd done, and she knew what it might cost. Because for every voice online calling her brave, there were others calling her something else. She stole company property. She's just a kid. What does she know? Must be fake. No janitor's daughter pulls off something like this. Angelica read the words in silence, then closed her laptop. It was easier not to let it sting if you never believed the world would cheer for you anyway. Down the hall, her mother sat at the edge of the bed, phone in hand, unopened email on the screen, termination notice, final payment waived due to pending review. She hadn't told Angelica yet, but Angelica knew. She saw the way Marisol stopped singing while she cooked, saw how she stared longer at the door when the mail came, saw the quiet look of someone who used to believe survival was enough, until it wasn't. Angelica sat beside her. They didn't speak. They didn't have to. Marisol reached over and took her hand. Some people dream of being heard, she whispered. Others dream of being safe. Angelica swallowed. I didn't want to choose, she said. Her mother nodded. But you did. The next day, she got a call from a blocked number. She almost didn't answer, but something told her to. The voice on the other end was soft, careful, professional. Miss Monroe, this is Evelyn Sy. I'm a corporate ethics investigator with the Department of Financial Oversight. I'd like to meet with you. Angelica froze. Am I in trouble? No, Evelyn said. You might have prevented some. The meeting was set for Friday in a neutral office, downtown, far away from marble lobbies and keycard elevators. Angelica didn't sleep the night before. She stayed up with the second USB drive clutched in her hand, thinking about everything she'd risked, her school record, her future, her mother's job, their rent, her quiet life, her anonymity, her safety, and still, she hadn't regretted it, not once, because silence would have been heavier. She walked into the meeting room the next day with her hair tied back, wearing a collared shirt that didn't quite fit and sneakers with one fraying lace. No lawyer, no fanfare, just her. And when she sat down across from Evelyn and handed over the drive, she didn't tremble. This is everything I have, she said. No edits, no cuts, just the truth. Evelyn looked at her, really looked, and then she smiled. You did more than some full-grown executives have done in their entire careers? Angelica blinked. Then why do I feel like I broke something? Evelyn leaned forward. Because you did. But maybe it needed breaking. That night, Angelica walked home, past the lights of the city, past polished towers and dark alleyways, past everything that had once felt too big to touch. And for the first time in weeks, she didn't look over her shoulder. She looked ahead. Even though she still didn't know what waited there, she knew it would be hers to face, not theirs. It happened on a Tuesday, 3 weeks after the story first leaked, 2 days after the clause was officially withdrawn, and exactly 1 year to the day since Angelica Monroe had first walked into that building with her mother's extra gloves stuffed in her back pocket. The conference room on the 35th floor was full, not with reporters, not with employees, with them, the ones who signed things without reading, the ones who smiled at cameras and frowned at janitors, the ones who had learned, slowly, painfully, that some ghosts don't stay quiet forever. Malcolm Rennick stood at the front, flanked by Leona Price and a stern-faced legal advisor. There were cameras, yes, but there was also something rarer than press. There was silence, and then Malcolm spoke. Not loudly, not perfectly, but clearly. "There's a clause in our contract history," he said, "that shouldn't have been there. A clause that risked everything. Our assets, our trust, our people. It was buried in legal language, overlooked, and allowed to fester, because no one stopped to ask what it meant." He paused. "And one person did." A flicker passed across the room, barely visible, but real. "She was not on our payroll. She didn't have an office. She didn't wear a badge. She wasn't invited to our meetings. In fact, most of us never looked at her twice." Malcolm looked down for a moment, then back up. "Her name is Angelica Monroe." The room shifted. You could feel it, the way discomfort wrinkled like static in the air. Because they all knew that name now. They'd read it in the reports. They'd whispered it in elevators. They'd seen the file, the girl, the story. But this was the first time someone had said it out loud, in a suit, in a spotlight, on record. "Angelica Monroe read what no one else did," Malcolm continued. "She listened when others ignored. She understood enough to ask the right questions. And when we failed to listen, she found someone who would." He turned to the press table. "She didn't break the system. She exposed the cracks that were already there." A long pause. "She reminded us that integrity doesn't belong to a title, or a corner office, or a pay grade." He stepped aside. Leona took his place. She didn't speak from a script, didn't even glance at the notes in her hand. "She risked everything," Leona said quietly. "Her mother's job, her own safety. And for what? Not money, not credit, just the truth." She glanced at the door, then back at the room. "And I think it's time we said her name with the respect she deserves." Angelica wasn't there. She was at home, in the same apartment above the laundromat, sitting at the kitchen table with her mother, watching it all unfold on a secondhand tablet with a cracked corner. Marisol hadn't said a word since the broadcast started. "Now," she exhaled and whispered, almost too softly to hear, "They said it, mija. They finally said it." Angelica just stared at the screen, her eyes wide, her hands still, not smiling, not crying, just listening. Because after all this time, after everything she'd lost and everything she'd stood against, what mattered most wasn't the apology. It wasn't the public praise. It wasn't the suits trying to rewrite their shame. It was that for the first time, the silence was broken. And the name no one dared to speak now echoed from the top floor, all the way down. The next morning, Angelica Monroe stood in the lobby of Halverson & Co., not holding a mop, not wearing gloves, not pushing a yellow bucket. She wore jeans, a plain black hoodie, and a face that didn't flinch when security glanced at her badge. Then double-checked it, because this time, she had one, her own. Temporary Visitor ID. Angelica Monroe, Ethics Oversight Advisor, External. They didn't know what to do with her. People who had passed her in hallways for years without a glance were now offering soft nods, careful smiles, half-hearted attempts at kindness they'd never thought she'd earn. But she didn't come for that. She didn't come for the photos, or the applause, or the barely disguised guilt behind the reception desk. She came because they asked her to, because the company, after everything, had asked her opinion. That was the part no one wrote articles about. After the clause was pulled, after the press cycle quieted, after the CEO made his statement and the audits were announced, someone from the new compliance team reached out, not to offer her a job, not to brand her as the face of change, just to ask, what would you have done differently if someone had asked you first? And Angelica, after a long silence, had said one thing. Maybe start by looking at who's never in the room. So they brought her in. For one meeting, one conversation, one chance to speak on her own terms. She sat across from 5 board members in a bright conference room with expensive coffee and awkward small talk. And when they finally quieted down, she leaned forward and said, "This isn't a Cinderella story." The room went still. "I didn't lose a shoe and get rescued. No one invited me to the ball. I didn't get magic. I got ignored until I couldn't be." One of the board members shifted in his seat. "Of course, but the fact that you spoke up." Angelica raised a hand. "I'm not here for credit." Another pause. "I'm here to make sure no one has to do what I did, just to be heard." They nodded. Of course they did, but she didn't need their nods. She'd already learned silence can be louder than applause, and respect isn't something you get because someone finally sees you. It's something you hold even when they don't. After the meeting, one of the younger board members walked her out. He tried to be friendly, tried to ask what school she wanted to apply to, tried to slip in a quiet offer. "If you ever need a recommendation letter," she smiled politely, but didn't say yes. Because Angelica Monroe didn't want to be a symbol, didn't want to be a mascot for redemption. She just wanted them to remember this, that the janitor's daughter didn't ask for a miracle. She read the paper no one else bothered to read. She told the truth no one wanted to hear. She paid the price and still came back. Not for a seat at their table, but to remind them the floor they stood on had always belonged to people like her. They just hadn't looked down. It was signed on a Thursday. No champagne, no speeches, no PR team hovering in the background with carefully worded sound bites. Just a long table, a stack of papers, and a kind of quiet that didn't feel forced. It felt earned. The new contract was 15 pages shorter than the last one. Every line had been triple-checked. Every clause reviewed by not one, but 3 external auditors. And clause 17.3, gone, deleted, erased, replaced with a simple statement. This agreement shall be reviewed in full by all signatories with express transparency and no buried sub-language. Non-negotiable. They called it a safeguard. Angelica called it a start. She wasn't in the room when they signed it. She didn't want to be, but they sent her a copy, digital, watermarked, addressed to her name, Angelica Monroe. Not the janitor's daughter, not the anonymous source, not the girl from the article. Just her. The email came with a short note from Malcolm Rennick himself. "It's not everything, but it's cleaner now, thanks to you." She stared at that line for a long time. Cleaner. Not perfect, not fixed, but cleaner. The way a room looks when the mess is finally acknowledged, when the hidden dust is swept out, not pushed deeper under the rug. Angelica didn't reply right away. She sat with it. Let it sink in. Let the weight of what it meant settle in her chest. Not just that the contract had been rewritten, but that someone had rewritten it, because she'd made them look. That night she walked into the kitchen where her mother stood drying dishes. Marisol turned, towel still in hand, a question in her eyes. Angelica held up her phone, screen still glowing. "They signed it," she said softly, "without the clause." Marisol blinked, then smiled, just a little. "Good," she said. "About time." Angelica leaned against the counter. "They offered to name part of the review protocol after me," she added, lips twitching. "The Monroe procedure, or something like that." Her mother raised an eyebrow. "You said yes?" Angelica shook her head. "No, I asked them to name it after the cleaning staff instead." A pause. "They're the ones who really see everything." Marisol didn't say anything at first. Then, just before turning back to the dishes, she said quietly, "They finally learned how to clean up after themselves." Angelica smiled. Not a wide smile, Not a victorious one, but the kind that comes when something ends the way it should have started. With honesty, with clarity, with eyes wide open, and not a single lie buried under the words. She still walks those halls. Not every day, not on a schedule, not as an employee with a title printed in bold font next to a door, but every once in a while, maybe once a month, maybe less, Angelica Monroe rides the elevator up to the 32nd floor, badge in hand, eyes steady, and walks the same path she once mopped in silence. No one ignores her now. They nod, smile, step aside. Some of them still don't know what to say, and that's fine. She doesn't need their words. She has her own. After the clause was erased, after the audits were done, after her name finally made its way onto a plaque in the legal department's training room, she did something that no one expected. She went back to school, not law school, not finance, not corporate strategy. She studied language, legal language, political language, the kind of words that get used to hide things, and the kind that get used to finally tell the truth. And now she teaches one class once a week in a small community college just outside the city. The course title is simple: The Fine Print, Power, Language, and Accountability. Her students call her Ms. Monroe. Some know the story, some don't. She never leads with it, because the story isn't about her. Not really. It's about all the people who go unseen until the moment they refuse to stay that way. It's about how silence isn't the same as consent, about how the floor you clean might just be the one that cracks open something bigger, about how watching doesn't make you weak, and speaking doesn't mean you asked for war. One night she stays after class. A girl lingers by the door, clutching her backpack straps, eyes wide. "Ms. Monroe," she says, "how do you know if it's worth it? Saying something, when it's hard." Angelica looks at her for a long moment, then answers quietly, "You don't." A pause. "You just decide you'd rather lose sleep than lose yourself." The girl nods, slowly, leaves. And Angelica sits in the quiet for a while, alone, but not invisible. Later, she takes the subway home, walks past the same laundromat, climbs the same stairs. Her mother still leaves the porch light on, even though Angelica always says it's unnecessary. Some habits don't change, others must. But one thing stays true. Every time she passes Halverson and Co., whether she walks through the lobby or just along the sidewalk, someone glances her way. Not because she's loud, not because she asked for their attention, but because they know her name now. Because she didn't just walk through those halls, she made sure they would never forget that she had.